It's crazy to me that like I almost feel like because I stopped, the whole world stopped. And obviously it's
Right,
not the
right.
case. And to hear that DFS even still exists,
Sure.
much less that these people that we know about are still winning.
Starting with that Discord, the birth of that Discord or the creation of it, it was definitely pre-COVID for sure. When I
Yeah.
started like getting interested in the what the skill aspects, it was all community at that point. It reminded me a lot of 2+2 in poker at that time, where 2+2 was a forum that all the poker minds got on before really like group chats were kind of established and all that. And all the brightest minds were there, and we had every sport laid out. I had to add a couple sports in there, but I chase overlays. That was always my thing, right? I don't care if I'm sitting with the best in the world. If there's house money involved, you got to beat me as well as get in front of that. So I chase sports. I went cross sport all the time. I would get into WNBA, and you forget that the world keeps spinning, right? I cashed a NASCAR tournament for 100K in February. It's just wild.
Wow.
Like, I won 3 satellites to a 500, and it was an 800 player field. I was 3 of the entries and just got lucky enough to bink the whole thing.
I feel like the thing I'm feeling when you're saying all this is for people listening, we sound like we're recapping like the beginning of the movie 21 or some like high level algorithm, like we're all geniuses and we all like pulled our resources together. I mean, I don't even think of myself that way half the time. Like I feel
Oh,
like
I do. I've related to that movie in like several different industries. I
no, I
feel
do
like
too. I just feel like I go back and forth where sometimes I'm like, I'm the greatest gambler ever. And then other times I'm like, I'm just an idiot who found other idiots and we just took like this gaming the system thing that was not that sophisticated. But then when we really talk about it, it's like it actually was. Like it almost
yeah,
doesn't
until
feel like
you talk to
reality.
any normie at all about anything, and then you're like I literally have a day job now. I work in a freaking warehouse, and I have no shame in that at all. But like when I talk sports to people, oh boy, I gotta dumb it down. I gotta dumb it down a lot. And like I can't talk about anyone outside the local teams with it's just you like there's nobody that thinks about an entire sport the way that we do. Even if you look at people that do fantasy football drafts, they know their team. They sweat their team. They don't sweat the rest of the league even.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's like pretty amazing when you look at, I'm getting my daughter's getting into athletics, right? So she's getting into volleyball. She's good at it. She's excited. She got into basketball. I know basketball quite well. I don't know anything about volleyball. I don't have any analytics. I don't have anything, but I'm watching people that are paid to coach high school basketball not have a clue how anything works.
Yeah,
I
it's
kind of
not just
value
betting,
that.
it's sports, right? I guess like yeah, I know football from betting on it and playing fantasy. I guess like playing Madden too.
Sure.
Uh yeah, because it's funny, you interact with, the normie crowd probably on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't care that it's
I
X.
like Twitter. Yeah, it's
Twitter
like
is
Twitter to
just I
me.
like tweets, I like Twitter, yeah, and it's not political. I just like calling it Twitter
Sure,
and
of
I can't help
course.
it. You interact with a lot of normies there, and I guess yeah, that's interesting that you're interacting with it. People who don't know stuff through your daughter's youth sports. That's I'd not have okay. Um, but I'm so because I don't watch sports anymore, like I literally don't watch anything.
I believe it.
I am socializing more, so I'm in bars and I'm sports are sometimes on. Like I am
Sure.
watching, but I'm not choosing to watch. It just happens to be on in the environment.
You run into some hockey players.
Yeah, sometimes I run into Rangers and Devils guys. One time Daniel Jones, but no, I'm talking mostly about the fans that are watching that have parlays pulled up on their phones. Like I'm watching
Yep.
people gamble, and it's like, oh my god, these people are screwed.
Zero chance.
They don't. They will never win. And if they win, it's almost worse because they will lose it faster, thinking that they
I
know.
promise you, I looked at a guy. He told me he had a 20 leg parlay. He told me he had a dollar. He told me he had a buck 50 on it. He actually bet $1.50.
I feel like I'm no longer in a position to help any of those people. Like we could sit here and have a fun time for 20 plus minutes just talking about how much everyone sucks at betting. And I just don't like
They
it would be
also
kind of
don't want to be
amusing, but
helped.
they don't, yeah. Well,
No, like that's
so
the hard part.
we were in a Discord. I looked it up. We had 88. Well, I guess there's 88 people in it now. Maybe it was like 100 or so when we started it. To kind of like circle back a little, we were in this Discord that we ended up in by accident that some random person on the internet had started.
That might have been the last like group chat I've taken seriously, like since
Yeah.
that joint. You know, like it's weird how it's all evolved.
So yeah, we were in this one together, but I don't think there was a huge gap between when we were doing DFS all as this group of people who had never met before, like this random group of misfits who I think a lot of those guys are really smart. A lot of them had insights that definitely shaped the way I think about
I'm incredibly
fantasy.
honored to have met the guys in there. Like, you're the best example, right? Like I met you, and there were many of yous in there. There were many of me's in
Yeah.
there. We were, the people that took it as seriously as we could. We had a lot of fun and
And my
laughs.
friend Jordan, who built the meter,
Yep,
who
yep.
wasn't really in there, but is like the
The
behind the
original,
scenes
yeah.
creator. Yeah.
I mean, Lucky Guesses, Dark Sheep, like a lot of those guys were just like, there's an emotional element of this where like we know we're entering contests that are high variance. There's a lot, we're all playing a winning strategy that includes a lot of variance. And like, you're always in different parts of the equation, right? You're never fully against each other. So like in a way, you kind of needed people to boost you up. You needed people, oh yeah, you lost 80% today, but you played okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that in a while, where both for fantasy and for betting, we would spend hours either right after games had all ended at midnight, 1 in the morning, whatever, or the following day, just talking through like, oh, I lost a bunch of money, but these were my strategies, and have everyone else in there kind of like give you feedback, like, oh, you should have done this instead, or no, you actually made the right moves today, and you just
Well,
did.
so let's even talk about what that looks like. So I'll give a little recap of what it felt like to me at the
Yeah.
time, right? So NBA news moves the fastest of every sport. We'll just stick with NBA for now. So lines would be aggressively moving. The the winning strategies took a lot of preparation. You had to work out all these if then scenarios. Okay, well, and then back then there was a lot more total surprise news. There was no fines for ruling players out. They were learning what it was like to have rest management, to have players, that just sit because they wanted them to, right? So we
Yeah.
were learning what it was like to have that news filter through the networks. There were all these new books that I didn't even have access to, right? Like I've watched that video you made of steals like at least 20 times, and I've gotten very little action in that. And like that reminded me of what it was like being in the trenches, but I was with you guys rooting you on, but not able to access those markets, right? So it was like this never-ending battle of like, I don't know, do I freaking go to Virginia and like put a laptop there and like get in a hotel for, you have all these stories about driving across state lines, and you were fortunate enough to live in a tri-state like crossover area.
Well, so I can kind of talk about it now. Enough time has
Yeah.
passed. The reason I quit my job at DraftKings is because if you were a sportsbook employee of any kind, you are not allowed to bet on sports in the state of New York. So in New Jersey, you just can't bet at the sportsbook you work at. I was
Okay.
working at DraftKings from early 2020 until late 2022. For that time, I was not allowed to bet in New York State. I could do Jersey. I had to bet on all the other sites. I basically just didn't have access to one site, which was fine. Like that wasn't a huge deal.
Yeah, it doesn't change
They were
much.
going to limit me anyway at some point. So
But yeah,
it didn't
sooner rather than
matter.
later.
But I had no access to all the New York sports books. I probably made my salary back in the first month after because and you probably don't know the full extent of it. You know most of it. People
Sure.
listening are going to know none of this. The amount of money you could make if you had a sizable bankroll plus you didn't have limits on your accounts it felt like infinite. Like the only impediment, the way that we did basketball specifically, you were guaranteed to win money, and it was just a matter of how much money could you win.
Yeah.
And you were guaranteed as long as you wouldn't chase your losses, because this is a thing.
Sure.
Because here's what would happen a lot, and I think you were kind of getting at this. People would follow my picks, and maybe they didn't start out with a big bankroll. So maybe they'd be betting on a thing where I would bet $1,000 or $2,000. They'd bet like $20 or $50. They weren't starting with them. And I started small too, but I was a couple of years into it at this point. So I built up some money. But I think what would happen is people would bet $50 a game and probably do okay maybe they'd miss a couple of the bets that I was making because they were very time sensitive. And if you have a day job while you're trying to follow, I know you went through this.
Yep.
If you have a day job while you're trying to follow what I'm doing, even when I did have a day job, it was a work from home job for a sports book. So I was following this stuff all day long, partly for work anyway. So even when I was at DraftKings, I was still able to place bets no matter what. I was just on my computer looking at sports betting lines for work and for myself. So let's say I made like 10 bets in a day and 7 of them won, and another person was only able to make 6 of those bets and went like 3-3 or 4-2. They would feel some kind of FOMO, like, oh, I should have won more money. And a lot of those people, I would see this, it would lead them to want to catch up and make their own bets on the side in addition to the bets that they got from me. And in a lot of those cases, they'd be betting more money on the not so good value thing
Right.
they thought of. They'd be betting more dollars on that than the thing that I told them that I had spent so much time researching.
Your picks also, as we went through the years, there was literally a confidence level attached to each one.
Yeah.
You weren't betting the same size on every bet. So like you could easily go 3-7 and have a winning day, right?
That's
you could
true.
go
If you miss that
have a losing day. Like if you hit the 5-unit one where it's like, oh, Jokic got ruled out. The line's moving 8 points. They're playing DeAndre Jordan. Good God. Like, those days, those like.
You're right. The example where, let's say I go 1-2 and my 2 losses are 1-unit bets and my 1 win is a 9-unit bet, and the person missed the 9-unit bet and just went 0-2.
Or they just had 1 unit on it.
Or just didn't get that much money on it. Yeah. What that does to someone psychologically, yep. I knew what was going on at the time. Like, I'm not going to say that I didn't, like, I wasn't oblivious to it, but there was no way to tell that person, hey, like, over the long run, you'll do fine. Don't chase.
How much of this topic affected you?
It affected me in my early days. So, like, you didn't know me at the time, but I was a competent but bad gambler. Like, sure. I was good and bad for 6 years before I figured out how to win. And part of what it was is I was following touts who were good. Like, I'd found some of the good ones. The guy who taught me how to bet, I don't even how to bet on basketball. He had a player rating system. It was 10 years ago, and I would follow his picks. And it was very similar to like the 538 ratings. Like it did well.
But that guy taught you how to bet though. Like what you're just.
It taught me the psychology to like not. I went through so many ups and downs from 2014 and 2015 until like before the pandemic that by the time sports came back post COVID, I like knew my mind a lot better. And it would be like, I really feel a strong impulse to bet a random over on this MAC football game at 2 a.m. on a Friday night that I know nothing about because I'm trying to not even get back to even, but get back to the number I thought I should be at. Like,
yeah,
an arbitrary dollar number that I should have at this point.
That you feel like you earned.
Yeah, right. And it all was for nothing. And post 2020, I was able to not make those bets. Like, I had the self-control. It took me 6 years to get self-control is essentially what I'm saying. So I understand how people didn't have it because I didn't have it. Like, I was full-fledged gambling addict. If in hindsight, for years, the difference was I was good enough at it that I was treading water. Like, financially speaking,
I've literally had that exact conversation with myself 100 times, right? Like, I obsessed with poker when I was like 16 and it became my life by 19. And like, it still is a decent chunk of my life. And am I just a gambling addict or am I just good at it? And it's a really narrow line. It's the same thing with, having a crypto portfolio, same thing with betting on sports. It's every bet is also a place where your money's not, right? It's not in a savings account. It's not.
Right, let me ask you this. If you spend 50 hours a week on something and break even for the year, is that an addiction? It's a great
question. It's a great question. But if you're having fun, that's one thing. If it's
how much fun is it really, right? Like we tell ourselves,
causing you pain, that is another conversation, right?
Yeah. What kind of fun are we talking? Because in hindsight, it's like there were really fun moments. I'm talking about this first iteration of my gambling, not the part where I actually was winning, but the part where over 6 years, maybe I was minus 1%. Like I barely lost any money, but the highs and lows, what it did to my brain, there's no way in totality it was fun. it was not a good use of time. The opportunity
Sure.
cost that you're alluding to
Yeah,
is the
but
problem.
yeah, but number one, you were aware of the pitfalls.
Not at first, but yeah.
Fair. But like you obviously obsessed about it to a level that you were able to have a king level extraction and dominance over a situation, right? So like
Eventually.
it was obviously like something that was worth your time. So the upside is that the market was available, right? So when you're in a casino and you're at a blackjack table, there's a reason why there's a whole stack of $5,000 chips in that thing is because you're able to win them if things go a certain way. They are technically available to be won. They're in play, right? And
Yeah.
when the sports book at the time, and I think limits were among the bigger reasons that you stepped away. I could be wrong about
No,
that.
it's the number one reason, yeah.
Yeah, so like limits stop the ability to be able to see those 5K chips, right? Because if you invest in this skill, I can scale this in a way that I can, if I'm right, be really right, So I hear you in a lot of what you're saying. It's not for everybody, but to the people that it is for, I don't necessarily want to discourage them. It is a brutal path. And I don't know how much meat there's left on the bone in a lot of these conversations, right?
Right.
There's no layering up parlays anymore and getting those in the way we used to have like 20 parlays all queued up and ready. Like that's just not a thing anymore, right?
Yeah, let me just explain what that is for a
Sure.
moment.
Yeah, I love this part of the story.
And also what we got out of Discord ties into it too. So um maybe let's do that first. We're gonna get to the way that the betting actually happened. But I got one insight from we talked about this fantasy Discord that we ended up in. That is separate from one that we started for ourselves.
Correct.
The one that we started, it was a YouTube show that me, you, and Mike G did. And then we had a Discord where people would watch our live streams and ask us questions in real time, and then basically be asking me questions throughout the entirety of the day. This was after I quit my job, so I was in that chat 1,000,000% of the time. It was, if I can explain
you cared about the show so much, so you're trying to be a good boss and a good customer at the same time.
The way that my day would start every day is I'd wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, and within 2 minutes I'd be on the stream. Like I would roll out of bed. My bed is 3 feet over there.
Yeah, that's fine.
10 a.m. wake up, maybe like 9:58, and we'd be on the air at 10:02 or something. And
Mike and I have been up since 5 a.m.
Yeah, no. I'd pull up my two laptops. I'd have them both here. One would be the YouTube stream with the Discord and whatever, and then the other one would be the tweet deck.
Yep.
All the beat writers. And so I'm on the stream with you guys, and I'm just watching news. And the way it would work is I literally followed every single person that covers an NBA team and would just stare.
So let's talk about what TweetDeck was like, guy. This is a whole conversation, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really is.
You're watching the fact
you didn't have news back then. There wasn't like shows the same way there were now. You had to go get every bit of it. So Matt introduced me to he had a separate Twitter account, and all the Twitter account did was follow anybody that was relevant in beat reports, whatever. And so this was the beginning of the spread of news in a very unique way. How many situations did we break? It really, like you're reading a tweet and you're trying to interpret the wordage to decide the severity of the injury, and the verbiage meant everything. And like
we'd be on the air and we'd be like, okay, you've got 17 seconds to bet on this Heat game because they just said something about Jimmy Butler not showing up to the shoot around.
Yep.
And Spoelstra was the best because he would say like very coy, like subtle terms about it. Like Jimmy's not here, and that's all you'd get. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It would be 11 a.m. and it's like, where are they? Is it like we had to know the exact schedule of every team every day.
With the travel schedules,
or the game went to overtime the prior night, and we're using that to decide what to bet on for the next night.
Sure. All kinds.
Yeah. So on that point though, like limits tie in here. Like I kind of like sticking to the timeline, and then we'll get to all the things that were part of it. But no. It's because there's so much here, and I'm like remembering it all in the
I'm remembering it in real time too. That's part of it.
This is why I wanted to do this, because it's like we forget how fun
discovery mode.
Sports books were all new.
Mhm.
right after sports betting was legalized in Jersey in 2018. And in other states, a lot of it was right after 2020. So it was the combination of the sports books were rookies. They didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
Like you could, I remember in 2020, there was a game during the bubble where Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were both ruled out. And this site called The Score, which was a random New Jersey sports book that ended up going out of business for reasons that'll make sense in 5 seconds. They left the lineup for, I think the Grizzlies were playing the Nets. The Grizzlies were +3. They were underdogs. Durant and Kyrie got ruled out, and the line didn't move for 4 minutes. The Grizzlies were favored by 15 when the line closed. Like it didn't, they just had no idea how to track anything. By the time that we got to where we were doing a Discord, though, the way the sports books handled news was better. Like they didn't have as many of the glitches, but you'd still have 30 seconds or something or a minute to make a bet if we found breaking news. So it was like enough of a window where you could do it, but you had to be very attentive because it would go from like there'd be a couple minute delay in 2020. Maybe in 21, it would be like 60 to 90 seconds. But by like 22, which is primarily when we were doing it, and I guess into early 23, you'd have like 30 seconds or a little
15
less.
to 15 to 30,
And it shrunk over the course of the season. By that April, it was like 5.
Yep.
And then I'm sure now.
But then also it's still gotten sharper in ways that they don't post the lines the same way that they used to. They're if Durant's questionable, they know to post Durant's lines and nobody else's, right? They used to post the whole team.
They don't post the players that would benefit or
right. They're smarter. They're much smarter about that.
The video I made, I talked about this, where in December of 21, we weren't doing the show yet, but I would wake up and I would start staring at the tweet deck, and I didn't go outside during daytime for a whole month. That like from December 1st to, I don't know, maybe it was even into January, I literally would just do this for the entirety of sunlight and like not go outside.
As a Floridian, this sounds insane. Like my life. So part of what you're describing is it was just fucking miserable outside, and it was like not exactly an enticing to. You weren't missing anything by
staying. Right, and it was dark at 5 p.m., so it's not as many hours as it sounds, but still, like I probably didn't go outside till midnight most days.
Well, that's the grinder's life, man. Like when you're in the lab and you're obsessing, like when you find an opportunity, that's really what it is. It was a opportunity. It mixed a couple different things. It's fun. It's interesting. It's sports. It's also competitive. There's a lot, like anytime you can bet on yourself, there's an element of coolness there where it's like, okay, I believe in myself so much here. Here it is. And when those results pan out, you got no one to thank but yourself, no one to blame if they don't, right? So it's like the ego is justified, and that kind of is fascinating to me.
For sure. Yeah, I had to be pretty careful of the validation that I was getting from people. Like I was going through our Discord messages and like someone was saying they were going to name their kid after me or whatever because of Slovenia Heritage Night. I'm like, this feels really good. Like I gotta be cautious about like how much of a state pump I get off of just random people I never met saying how amazing I am. Like I'm not doing something that, but then again, like it was so, I think we were doing the best existing gambling content on earth for a while.
So I don't mind plugging the fact that I'm contributing on ETR right now. They were definitely created after us. Right. And I remember they brought Gallagher to life, and Mike Gallagher is a genius, but he wasn't making content yet.
These guys didn't share their stuff. That's
right.
I'm not saying I was the best gambler on earth. I'm saying I was putting it on the internet in a way that no one does.
That time period,
and it was free.
Yeah, no, what we posted our work publicly in a way that nobody else did, and I'm proud of that. I really am.
I think a handful of people did really, really well from it. But so the benefit, the thing that I found the most interesting about doing that, so one of the people like podcasters I listen to the most, Alex Formosi, I actually don't think I got this from him. I don't remember where I got it from, but the concept of let's just do it for free. One, because you don't know what you're doing.
I probably put it in your head.
Maybe. Like it was your idea to do the YouTube show. So Yeah, I mean, we
I'll be
talked
honest, like
about
it. So one of the guys that I followed at the time is Naval Ravikant, and
right. Okay, that
that's
makes
so
sense.
this is one of the types of ways that he, you know, one of his things is how to get rich without getting lucky, and it's providing value. It's, you know, building a network. It's like it's a lot of these things where if you're good, man, and you can prove it, making money is an afterthought. Like it kind of was also. We didn't really make any direct money, but I loved what that project was, and I'm proud of it even to this day.
Yeah, and I guess I was making enough money for myself that I didn't care to charge people $10. I just wanted people to be part of it. I just
But
wanted to have.
also, when it comes to financial advice directly, if you charge for it, it directly taints
True.
the outcoming product. So we can beat around the bush and say this is not financial advice. You can do your own research. You gotta make your like we can beat around the bush and say it, but we were just saying what we were doing. And
Right.
obviously we knew people were gonna react upon that. And the reality is you have to be able to own and be have a level of confidence in those picks that not many people are willing to do.
So the thing that came out of it though, like I love all of this, but the one thing that came out of having Discord that was by far the highest ROI was, and I don't remember which person it was in there, but it was the guy that told us how the back-to-back injury reports work, where I did not know that injury reports had to be submitted at a certain time. You didn't know this. None of us knew this. And he like didn't want to tell us.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I
this
remember
person
this.
listens to this podcast so that he can remind us of it. But like the guy who knew this hack didn't want us to know. And then we finally, like, he kept hinting at it. And then I finally was able to gather what he was talking about after a few days of him basically
If I
not
remember
wanting to
right,
share.
if they're on a back to back, they don't have to report till 6 hours before the game time or something along those
It
lines.
was
So,
it was 1:30 local time of the next day
correct.
was the hard stop. You must submit an injury report.
Yeah, so 4:30 Eastern sometimes for a West Coast game was when we were getting some injury reports for the very first time, which is pretty late in the day for first injury reports, and oftentimes those may not even be the finals.
But for rest games, it would be just like it's binary. So if a
And
guy was
rest games are
hurt,
so new
if it
also.
was a if it was a if a guy was hurt, then you would usually get an update at those intervals. Like the guy may or may not play. But if a guy was maybe going to rest, you would literally be finding out in or out at an exact moment in the day. Like I posted on my Instagram, I posted a tweet that I had put out almost 2 years ago now. I literally tweeted at 122, Giannis is probably going to get ruled out in 8 minutes. And sure enough, 130, there's the tweet from Underdog. And it looks like voodoo, but like that was just this one guy. I'm sure other people knew about this. But like the amount of money that I made because of that dude in the Discord,
Yeah.
like it made it all worth it. I didn't need to charge anything. Like that one insight was worth everything. So like the secondary payoff of making that free, like who knows if that person would have been in there. It was
Of course
just
not.
so the way I think we wanted to talk about like the logistics of making those bets at those times.
Yeah.
So what was interesting was, I mean, at this point, I don't mind name dropping sports books because it's been a year and a half since I was betting in June of last year, and I don't plan to do it anymore anytime soon. So whatever. FanDuel was unique where they actually had really high limits still for me. And I think for most people who were sharp bettors,
It's
but
still fairly true from what I understand.
but because they're the best one at following at like not breaking to the injury news, the algorithms, whatever. Like when news would break, FanDuel would get their stuff off the board earliest.
They had the best traders. It's the best way to describe it.
They're the best.
They had the sharpest traders at the time. I don't know how true that still is, but at the time it wasn't close.
As someone who used to work for DraftKings, I mean, whatever, it's been enough time now. FanDuel was the best run sportsbook, at least.
Right. I think that's fair.
Yeah, my friends at DraftKings, when they hear this, that'll be funny. So FanDuel, you would have a lot less time to place a bet, but you could bet a lot more money. So it became, at a certain point, my limits were so low on other places that it still just made sense to bet on FanDuel, even though you had to be faster. So knowing that there would be an exact moment in the day where you'd find information was so important because you had to time the news. So the way I would do it, and I have videos of this on my computer, is I would queue up 25 bets. I guess those are the maximum you could have in your bet slip on FanDuel. And I would I would type in the dollar amounts that I was about to bet into each slot for each potential bet. And if one thing happened, like a Joel Embiid surprise notification, every single other player on the Sixers betting on the other team, the over-unders, whatever, they would all be good bets based on this one piece of information. So I would literally have them all ready. It could be like 25 bets for a total of $18,000. I wasn't sure if I was going to say specific dollar amounts on this episode, but whatever. I'll edit them out if it feels weird.
Large numbers.
Big numbers, 25 bets for the amount of money that people are shaking probably listening to this.
A used car.
Yeah, and that's a good way to.
I have to shape things into cars a lot. Hopefully not houses, but occasionally cars.
A pretty solid used car. And
used car, you know.
And if this one tweet came through on my second laptop over here, I would literally just press enter, and all the bets would go through at the same time. And it was like you'd have to make sure you were logged in because that was the other thing.
I always thought of it like dominoes. You'd press the first domino and you watch them all fall. And they're like scattering around. And you're like, dude. You know, but let's actually talk about. So
yeah,
one of the things that I found fascinating, and this is still true, is when you handicap a situation. Nowadays, there's literally a bunch of ways to play it, right? So we did a ton of work in understanding when players are in and out in basketball, it obviously affects where the ball goes. It affects who shoots the ball. It affects, who passes the ball. It affects everything, right? So a lot of times there's correlation between these plays, right? So when you build these parlays, you had to decide, okay, I'm going to have one ticket for this point, for points, one ticket for rebounds, one ticket for assists. Well, do I play those or do I skip them, right? Does it actually move or does it actually not? Do I play PRA together? Do I play, is it actually affecting the minutes of the player or is it just affecting the usage, right? So it was this game of like, you have, certain amount in the account that you're ready to fire, certain amount of ways you can play it, certain amount of leverage you can build, right? I mean, we had some situations where we thought a guy was going to play like Draymond came in and fouled a guy right away.
Yeah.
There was a game where we could have made infinite doing.
We didn't know. So that one was not
ready for that. I think.
I don't think that one was beatable. You're talking about the one guy had like
fouled.
It was I feel like it was Draymond was injured, but it was Klay Thompson's return from ACL surgery, and Draymond just played so that he could take a foul because they wanted him to be in the starting lineup for Klay's return. But he actually wasn't healthy enough to play the game, so he just took a foul and went out. And if you bet all the unders on Draymond's props, you won everything. I was not prepared. I didn't know that was happening.
That was the kind of thing we could have got to. Yeah,
we did have other situations like that. I found one of Kevon Looney's games played streak.
Yeah,
where it was like
Mikal Bridges had a current game. I was trying to think if there was a game streak, but I couldn't remember which one. It was Looney. That's exactly.
Yeah, and I have a text to my friend Greg where I literally said to him, "Do you think Looney's going to play less than 5 minutes tonight?" And then we parlayed all because he had played like 180 games in a row, but it was a back-to-back, and it was like this makes no sense for him to play tonight. The rest of the team's out. I feel like the other thing related to this that people don't realize too is that because of the sportsbook inefficiencies, there were a lot of ways to win, which is part of the reason that I would never stop betting. Like every waking moment for over a year was spent gambling, essentially, because you'd have stuff where like you'd find out that Kevin Durant, who maybe is like third in the MVP running, got injured and he's out for a month. And the futures markets on like MVP races, those wouldn't update. Like you'd be able to bet. You'd find out something in the middle of the night that the team isn't even, it's the All-Star break. The team's not even playing for 4 days, but it would affect all these future bets too. And so there was always, my brain was just on for this. Like I didn't take a break ever.
And we talked about it. That's how I got so obsessed with this also is because you'd just be like, oh, it's Slovenia Heritage Night. I go, what does that mean? And you're just like, then we figure it out or whatever. So it was a never ending battle of, there was a lot of edges available. And when a new piece of information presented itself, when you're handicapping everything, you understand how difficult it is to be correct in all the right places, right?
Yeah. And
we're doing the bat and stuff. We're doing everything.
So we can get to baseball too, but I want to say like for basketball and I guess a little for football, but this is primarily for basketball. We didn't actually I handicapped some stuff. There was math involved. I would say a lot of decision-making was math first, but there was maybe an even larger percentage that was intuition first with a math framework as the secondary element. because if you were going to get information that was so substantial, then you could just approximate the math. You didn't need to be remotely close. Like there was a football example. I remember I used to watch football games and you were able to bet first touchdown props during when the offense had the ball.
Wow.
You could bet like next touchdown scorer. So it wasn't even just first. It was just live bet the person to score the next touchdown while the team that had the ball was on the while the offensive players you were betting
and
on.
It wasn't changing.
So it would be like Joe Mixon would rush for his fourth run of the drive. And this literally happened. Mixon was like the favorite for the first touchdown. He's the running back on the team with the ball. And maybe he had like 4 or 5 rushing attempts. And literally, I'm watching the game, and Mixon is jogging to the side.
They pull him out for a couple.
And Samaje Perine is putting his helmet on. And I'm looking, and then the odds of the next touchdown scorer, it's Perine. He's like 26-1 because he's the backup. And so literally
he's not 26-1 when he's in the game. He's 26-1 at a certain point, like pregame or something, right? Like,
well, it wasn't any time. It was to score the next touchdown.
Gotcha.
So the odds of the backup running back playing on the first drive and scoring are pretty low. But literally, the guy had a bunch of runs. Here he comes, like the guy's running onto the field.
A super normal thing that happens in a long drive.
Throw a couple $100, press button, guy gets a screen pass and scores on the next play. Like that stuff would happen sometimes. You didn't need to do any math to know that was a good bet. Is my point.
Sure. Of course.
I know the math very well, but you didn't need it in a lot of cases. Like the stuff was just so obvious. Like an idiot who was really attentive, but you're not an idiot if you can pay attention like that. Sure. But you know what I'm saying? Like someone
with a little bit of it. I mean, you just, it is approximating the math and people struggle with that. Like people listening to this are going to be like, well, yeah, but what was Samaje Perine to get a touchdown? I'd be like, I don't know, like 4 or 5, 6 to 1.
Did you calculate the EV? It's like, no, I know it was positive, and I bet whatever the maximum was.
Exactly.
Enough. Yeah, I would say like my best skill when it came to any of that, like, and maybe the best skill that I have in life is doing, like, I'm not a math genius, but I can do intermediate to like kind of high level math really, really quickly. So it's speed. Like literally, I was the best in my class in 3rd grade at times tables, and I think that's the skill I'm talking about.
Fair enough.
Like I can do 13 times 7 is 91 faster than almost anyone on earth, and that's the kind of math that this requires. Like it wasn't to be able to run algorithms and programs. It was
you had to update your live sheet in your head.
Right. You got to be able to do medium difficulty math in half a second. That's all it is. So I do understand that is a skill that most people don't have that much of.
And you have to have a large risk tolerance.
But you don't need to have a 200 IQ for that. It's risk tolerance and just this one niche skill of speed at mildly complex.
I wouldn't say this skill is dead either.
You know, well, you tell me, because I don't know what's going on.
Like that's why I'm bringing this point up. So you know, you brought up first touchdown. I think that's super interesting because one of the market, I don't play nearly as seriously as I used to. It's very casual. I react to news when I feel like it, things of that nature. But they do offer in basketball a first basket that is like, you can find some really unique edges if Luka gets ruled out and like Kyrie is like now he went from a certain type of percentage to it's whatever the odds are, they're way better, right? That he gets the first basket when Luka's not in the game. So there's some pretty interesting ones like that I've been able to look at, but how much can you really make in those markets when they're small like that? Not as much for sure.
Right. Like that, even just hearing that, it's like I still think that I can make an entry-level salary gambling.
Yeah. But
it's just like for the amount
of
effort.
You're not going to retire though. You're not going to. You don't get a 401k. You don't have benefits.
Right.
It's like,
and also, it's not an 8-hour. It's not an 8-hour a day job. It's much more than that.
Yeah.
And you're working weekends to do it. Like the calculus doesn't feel worth it. Now, if you're getting paid to do content, like my friend Greg is still doing really well in this field because he works in it and he also is doing this stuff too. And if you're a good DFS player, which I know we started with, and you can get back to it, like I don't know how beatable daily fantasy still is, because there's so much good information. Like even someone who barely knows anything can make really good lineups because the information they have access to is so cheap and just so easy to use, like lineup building tools and whatever. So maybe DFS is a separate category, but in sports betting, part of the reason that I could lose 30 grand in a night and be okay with it is like we would know that we made good bets for a fact. You bet a team that's favored by 3 points when they were 7-point underdogs. Like you're getting them at 3-1 to win the game, and they're the favorite.
You could get a much worse bet if you wanted to at the time. Like the line moves so much in your favor that like you could sell your bet if you wanted to. You never would, but but
it's a literal fact that you made the right move.
Fact.
And in fantasy, in daily fantasy, there's educated guesses, but it's not like mentally that grind always felt a little different to me. Of like that's why we would have these discussions that we were talking about at the beginning of like, guys, this is what I was doing last night. Do you think I did the right moves or not? Because if I bet like Denver -3 and they close -15, I don't need anyone to validate me that I made a good bet. Like 12 points of line movement, I know I did fine, and in the long run, I'm going to win. And it sucks that they didn't win the game, like that Nuggets Pistons game that I'm referring to. Like that was the worst thing ever. But
Christmas Day, Golden State and Memphis. I lost a nice new card that day, and that would hurt real bad.
Yeah, you could say maybe you overbet it in terms of dollars, but you would never have bet the other side.
I had 13 points of line movement.
Yeah.
That was the one where all the Warriors got ruled out. They left the game on the board for like a month, and they didn't. I got Grizzlies +4.5. It closed at -8.5. And the Warriors just blew them out. And like,
we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of it. It was Christmas Day 22.
Yep.
I remember I still, even though I don't know what sports are happening now, I still have very vivid memories of all of these bets.
Yeah, no,
but in fantasy, you have to be really, really confident in your skills to not let doubt creep in of like the doubt of, am I even good at this? In DFS, you could be winning for months and then you have a cold streak and it's maybe I was just getting lucky that whole time. Do I even know what I'm doing? So that's part of the reason, because when I stopped doing sports betting, I could have just went back to daily fantasy, right? Like that. I was pretty good at that too.
I actually just looked at our last conversation on Discord. I was sending you underdog NBA best ball drafts, right? As like a total casual format that you could have done. And you have this incredible basketball knowledge at the time. And you just were like, nah. And I respect that, of course, because, I questioned a lot of this because I don't enjoy watching the games, right? Like I'm going to go to bed and I may turn the game on. There's one game left tonight, but like, I don't need to watch it. No matter how much I have on the games, no matter how big my bets were, it's not a desire. I don't crave it. It's not a dopamine thing. So part of me is like, okay, this is a professional decision. I'm doing this because I believe in the process. I believe in the results. I believe in this, that, or the other. It's not necessarily this addiction that I fear. These are just the battles that I go through at times, and hopefully it's not a problem.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a mini addiction, but it goes in waves, and there's parts of it where there's no addictive tendencies associated whatsoever. But it's not this one constant thing. It kind of moves and evolves and changes. Like it wasn't one emotion that carried through this entire process. It definitely was adaptive. Going back to DFS though, like I kind of want to say this part for the people who are listening who don't even know what the hell we're talking about, because some of the people listening to my podcast don't know anything about any of this.
I'm going to share this to people that won't know what's happening either, so I apologize.
No. I this is why I do clips too, because people just watch the parts that make sense to them. But there are people, and so because I don't bet anymore, I'm meeting a lot more people because I'm out of my apartment. And there are a lot of the people that I know now, like the people I hang out with, I would say more than half of them I've met in the last 18 months. And those people don't even know, they don't even know me, essentially. They don't know this version of me. They never saw this.
Yep.
Because to them, I don't even like sports. I watch the Rangers and that's it. And like if other sports are on, I'm watching. So like I'm explaining what it was like, and they're like, that doesn't even sound like you. You don't even watch games anymore. Like I literally didn't know who Caleb Williams was till Thanksgiving. I found out DeMar DeRozan was on the Kings 3 days ago. Like how crazy is that? I mean, the thing that I would say I was born for, analyzing basketball.
Sure.
It's like the best I've ever been in
I
any.
asked you to be on a show with me for so long that
Right.
I thought at a point it actually strained our friendship. I was asking you so much. But
You were saying before we started the YouTube show, you kept saying,
yeah,
let's do a stream, let's do a stream, let's do
yeah,
a
let's
stream. Yeah.
like just because when we got on, no matter what happened, we talk ball. It was interesting. It was very insightful. We talked every spot through and through, and it was neat. And we would discuss the line movements, and it was just the first and what you said hit it perfectly. That was the sharpest content on that topic that had ever been released at the time. Sure, there's definitely smarter people that were doing it behind the scenes, but that's why I was so proud because I saw how different what you were doing was versus what everyone else was doing. And that was fun to me. That was like, okay, let's talk about let's you don't even want to charge for this thing, right? Like let's just get out there and do it. And that was what was so exciting to me, was just being in the trenches and getting out there.
It is weird to think about like that style of betting. I remember asking people, like I talked to Rufus Peabody a little bit. I remember telling him like we're playing this injury game. And he's like, I've never thought of that before. And he's like the godfather. He's like the person who introduced me to sports betting. I'm like, that guy's as sharp as anyone I've ever
He's
met.
a
He doesn't
modeling
even
data scientist, brilliant genius,
the
right?
idea that you would, instead of doing math and running numbers and trying to find the edge in every game or whatever games you can find an edge, that instead of doing math, you would just monitor information and win money because you're faster at clicking buttons than the casinos. And I guess part of the reason that like the original sports bettors, the really sharp guys, the Haralabob or whoever else that like came up, and they were in Nevada, you had to bet in person.
Yep.
In Vegas. Online sports betting didn't really exist until 2018. So like I just got lucky that I started betting on the internet.
Yeah.
And it just made sense to me that, okay, like, because I developed this mental muscle playing regular season long fantasy. I'd be up at 2:59 a.m. on school nights when I was in high school, waiting for the clock to change to 3 so that on Yahoo the day would reset and I can stream all my players for the next day to like get the best ads for the next day in basketball. Like I was doing that when I was 17, just because it was like, why would you not do that? There's like it's very try hard, but like that skill that's what it is now. And now I use it to try to track down where Jack Hughes is going to be. It's the same. I feel like it's the same thing. I've been on a cold streak. I haven't seen him in a while, or any Rangers.
I gotta hear the new Matt stories. What is Matt's new friends group like? What, or do you want to save that for later, or do we want to not talk about that? Or
I don't know. I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question because like it's not new anymore.
It's fair.
The last bet that I placed was in June of.
What do I not know about you? Like you say, they don't know this side of you, right? So there's obviously a new you has formed. You've come out of this cocoon, as a butterfly or whatever. So what is the new Matt's stance in life that is different?
I think you know me better than the new people know me. Because like the stuff that we used to talk about on the side is just the priority now. Like because we used to talk about nutrition and dieting. Like I would talk about me fasting, psychology, dating advice, whatever. Like we would have this other category.
How's love life been?
Once in a while, it's it's up and down. it's all over the place. We would talk about stuff like that, and but that was secondary. I also like when we would talk about any of that, like any socializing, I wasn't actually doing it. It was all in theory. Like now I'm in bars 3 or 4 nights a week.
Right.
And I still don't drink that much. Like it's like a couple drinks a night. Like I'm sober-ish. But yeah, I'm like out in the world all the time now. What's crazy is that
is an interesting way to be.
If someone invites me to a happy hour at 6 p.m., I can actually go now. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. That's fascinating.
I can never do that. I think people, what the people that I know now don't realize is like I was not available between noon and midnight ever on any day. You couldn't get me at those.
And even midnight, you were looking ahead at tomorrow's lines. You were seeing, if Trae Young was going to sit, was the team total right? Mm-hmm. There was all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right. Even towards the end, it would be like, April, May towards the end of the run, and it'd be 1 a.m. and I would be out, but I'd also be like, when Steve Kerr's press conference? So I can see what the Warriors are doing tomorrow. Yeah. So like it still was on. Like I still had to have my phone in my hand at every moment.
I don't think you're going to necessarily have thought this before, but to me, this is just what it is when you're like the alpha hunter. Like you're just the fucking king.
Thank
You're
you.
top of the fucking
This is
food
too
chain.
much praise, but okay.
No, I like. I'm trying to say I can relate to it, so it's a little bit
Too much praise
self-fulfilling
for
here.
both of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but like this is just how things are when you're at the top, and this you go to extreme lengths. You're willing to turn over every stone to win, and this is what you do.
It's still not clicking, honestly. That I mean, it does and it doesn't. You know what I mean? I like half
Sure.
believe you, which is and like it's. I think the biggest difference now is my level of. I feel like we're doing so much bragging, but this is the gambling episode. I'm wearing the Celtics thing. Like I'm probably going to post more of that DraftKings reel where I told everyone from Boston about how their team was good and they didn't believe me, and I have all the
I
footage.
love that clubs, and you're talking about when Boston made that run with they lost to Golden State, I think, in the finals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Steph
but like
Curry ruined my life. Yeah.
you had all these incredible bets lined up, 40 or more to win the title, 20 or more to win the conference, and Boston was, I don't know if you hedge, you're generally not a hedger, but
I
if you
hate
were
hedging.
overinvested like I could have been, then I might have taken some off. But it's just such a good opportunity and such a great spot that, kudos to you.
Yeah, I guess like when I think that I didn't own how good I was, or like I'm not. It feels too braggy to say like we're alphas at this thing. But then I remember I literally made a montage, like I did this
Yeah.
of all the times where I was right. So just to I'll recap that quickly. I was working for DraftKings. DraftKings is headquartered in Boston. Everyone who I would interact with, like I was doing YouTube content for DraftKings, so we would it wasn't just interacting. We'd be on streams together breaking down basketball. And every person that was on the other end of the stream, they were all Celtics fans because they all worked in Boston. A lot
Yep.
of them grew up in Boston, but they were all there. The vast majority were Celtics fans. I'm sitting here in New Jersey, and from January through April, just saying show after show after show, guys, the Celtics are like the best team in the NBA, and they're the 10th or
Did not
11th betting
reflect it.
odds to win. They're 30-1 to win the conference and 60-1 to win the finals. Let's not talk about anything else today. Can we just talk about betting on the Celtics to win the championship, to go to the finals, win the championship, win their division,
Just be bullish
and
on
be
them.
in
Totals,
every
everything.
possible way? And it was just every day over and over and over again, like the Celtics, the Celtics, the Celtics. And it was like, can we shut up about the Celtics already? And then they just went on this crazy win
Nah.
streak and made the finals. Like they
Well,
wouldn't want to talk about it anymore. And I have this one clip where one of the guys I worked with was like, I'd rather bet on the Knicks to win the finals than the Celtics. And the Knicks didn't even make the playoffs that year. So yeah, that was kind of the best thing ever. And my level of arrogance, I think I've tried to take it down since then because I was so annoying. But when you're right, I mean,
you actually weren't.
whatever.
Is the funny thing. Like, so, back, like when I think back to what that team was then, I remember if I'm trying to remember right, we knew how good Jason Tatum was because of 538.
We knew it because of Nate Silver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
And
knew the whole
also
team was
knew
good because of Nate Silver.
the replacement that I think that was the first team where it was like the backups were better than every other team's backups.
Yeah.
And like when you got to thinking about it, you're like, okay, these backups play a third of the game. Well, if a third of the game's decided by a giant mismatch, then it's hard to lose a lot of games, right?
Right.
Like
Your
if you like
backups
the
are
third of the
Derek
game.
White and Robert Williams, and I don't remember if Marcus Smart was probably a starter,
He
but
was a starter then.
the beginning of the clip was like the Celtics fans were like, "We should cut Marcus Smart. He's bad."
Yeah.
I literally am like, "I hope not." The Celtics are going to go to the finals.
He's been horrible ever since he left Boston,
Really?
which is common, but
But it was just like 538,
Yep.
which I guess we have not mentioned enough. Like I didn't make a basketball algorithm from scratch. We made it out of 538.
Yep. Yeah, their
We
player
used their
rating,
data.
offensive and defensive player ratings. And it really was that replacement level. We brought that up a couple times, but it's like there's 48 minutes at each position or whatever, and you got to divide it up however everybody's got to
This
be
feels
on the
like
court,
this
right?
feels like Moneyball. This
Yeah.
feels like we're Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt, and it's like this is like let's build a winning team from its component parts. And to me, I know basketball is more complicated than this, but it's an aggregate of offensive skill and defensive skill. And
Yeah.
team fit is important, but it's overrated. And it was really just like can you get the best functioning players on the court for as many minutes as possible? And in the aggregate, like that will probably do well. And if the coach is not like the coach can adjust the system at a certain point, or the players will just start doing. Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, like the team will just start figuring it out because there's so much talent. But the thing that was interesting about the Celtics specifically is that half the team had COVID. Like COVID was the best thing ever for gambling. Like
adding so much. You're just like you stepped on a landmine at like 6:38 every day. It's like somebody downgraded to questionable illness, and you're like, oh god, and it just changed the entire day out of nowhere.
Right. It wasn't just that sportsbooks were new. It wasn't just that we had like gotten some insight into how they worked at the beginning when they didn't know how to operate. It's that they were new and didn't know how to operate, and then they were playing during a global pandemic, and the rules around the pandemic were not solidified. So not only was there uncertainty for COVID, the NBA didn't know how to handle the COVID protocols, because the way it used to work was that if a player tested positive for COVID on the day of a game, they were out. They were out of that game. Even if it was a false positive, they couldn't play. That's what was so crazy. If the guy tested positive day of game, even if it was a mistake, that guy didn't play in the game. So the tweet deck would just say, guy has COVID, and it's like, all right, here we go. So you just have to be ready at every moment for anything. And I think that to like tie it back into the skill set of like why we can brag so much. Yes, it was cool to be like, okay, Giannis is going to potentially be ruled out at 130. What does that mean for the rest of the bets if that happens? And like prepare, because even though you'd have to bet in an instant, you still have time to figure out what those bets would be like. But there were so many other times where you'd be like, oh shit, like Yusuf Nurkic just got ruled out for COVID. Go. What do you have? Right?
Yeah, like, you're just like, what do you do with it?
Yeah, 45 seconds to figure out every possible good bet that can occur because the fourth best player on a team just got COVID. What does that mean? And like a lot of the time, you can make a ton of money on something super random because you just knew
Isaiah Stewart threes.
You right. Well, yeah,
that's a great one, right? Like,
yeah. Isaiah Stewart threes is the best thing that was ever produced by TweetDeck. Yeah. I have a video that actually I've already posted on Instagram about him from a while ago, but Isaiah Stewart essentially was the team tweeted that a guy who never shoots threes, or it was the beat writer at the coach's press conference. It was a team that was terrible. A tanking team towards the end of the season was like, hey, I think we're going to start telling our center who's bad at three-pointers to just start shooting them because
he told us how he was going to tank.
Right. It's like, why not work on him when we prefer to lose anyway? So this guy's going to start shooting more threes. We'll see what happens. And it's like, all right, let's bet on him to make some threes.
Crazy odds.
That guy went from shooting
nuclear day.
That guy went from attempting a three-pointer once every 4 games to shooting 4 threes a game.
Four. He was shooting 4 each of those first few games. It was wild.
And the first game where he made one, like I remember standing. I didn't sit during the first half of this game. I was standing
we were locked and loaded. I was only on the second game. Yeah,
it was like a 1 p.m. start, and the tweet had come out at like noon, so it was like a last second.
It was a Sunday.
On a Sunday, and it was a 1 p.m. start. It was the only game that was on at the time, so it was Nets Pistons, and I'm standing in my living room, and I probably had bet something like he was 7-1 to make a 3, and he was 40 to 1 to make 2 threes. So I think I had like 1,200 on him for the 1 3 to win like 10 grand. And then I probably had another $200 on him to hit the 2 at 40 to 1. So that'd have been like another 8,000 or something. It was probably like 17 grand if he made 2, but it was like 10 if he made.
So those were like 1 for 4, if I remember right.
No, it was better than that. So the first quarter, I'm standing his first time through the rotation. I'm standing in the middle of my apartment watching this game on TV, and literally every time down the court, he just ran down to the basket into the post. And I'm thinking, like, this isn't working. This is the dumbest bet I've ever made. Like, I just put that much money on this guy. He's not even near the arc. Like, what is wrong with me? I took this.
Why did I believe a stupid tweet deck?
I was like, I'm such an idiot. So the second quarter starts and he gets back in the game, and the first few possessions, same thing. And I'm just like, this is idiotic. Like I maybe I'm not that smart. And then finally he just on one transition just stops at the top of the arc, and they give it to him and he just drains it.
He just stopped at the top of the key and just like bink. You're like, oh hi.
And so what was crazy was the next possession he did it again and missed. Like he
Yeah.
almost went 2 for 2 on two
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
possessions. I think it went in and out on the second one, but then in the second half, he shot again and made one. He went 2 for 3. That was the outcome. So I actually did hit both. Yeah. And then the next game, instead of being plus 700, this is when we got in on. He was plus.
This is when I piled into the second one.
He was still plus 300 in the next game.
I'm trying to remember. I had plus 325 for one, and I got a pretty good action down. And I think we had 750 or 800 for two.
I think he only made one in that next game, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think he went 2 for 5. I think we hit both.
Yeah. I feel like I couldn't get the 2+ bet in the second game because it was on Bet365 and they like started limiting me after that or something. But then because I was on.
Could you imagine paying out that bet to your face?
Well, what started to happen with the sites, like I remember, I signed up for a Bet365 account in a state where I didn't already have one, and I bet Shohei Ohtani did a home run, and then I went to make a second bet, and I was already limited to $5 per bet on anything.
Yep.
Literally before a game had started, they were like, "You're limited for betting on the best player on earth."
It's like
to hit a home run.
Bizarre. Like if you can't take action, why have the business, man? It's so absurd.
But like, I get it because if I were a sports book, I wouldn't want me either.
I get it. I get it too.
I wouldn't want either of us. I wouldn't want anyone we know.
I always say it's like blackjack card counting. Like you brought up 21. It's like literally the same thing. Like they're like, oh, you know what you're doing. Pass. No, thank you.
Yeah.
You can bet $1.17, and like I'm not going to click the buttons for that. You know that. So it's like you're not banned. You're just limited to a suffocating degree.
So I want to close on what it would take to have us restart again. And my current answer is basically it's impossible. Like I don't think I'll bet ever again. Most likely.
Yeah, I don't know that I was prepared to hear this. So
what would have to happen? Like I guess what would you think would have to happen for us to like be back in it together?
I don't know. Your heart would have to be in it. Like that's the number one thing. Like that. Yeah. Like, for me, I don't know that I could make the time. I currently wouldn't have it.
And just to be clear, you still do DFS, but you're not really sports betting. Is that so? It would.
I react to news still. I definitely,
if you can.
I definitely, I don't have the modeled players the way that I used to, so I don't have the confidence level that I used to. I'm definitely probably making some mistakes in the grand scheme of things that are not as sharp as they used to be. But the Giannis, the Jokic, the Trae Young game totals, the basics. If I have an opportunity and it's convenient, sure, I don't mind.
So I think this point's important. Like I used to hear, why don't you just commit only half as much time and maybe you'll miss a few bets, but you'll still do well. And it's like if I spend 50% of the hours checking everything all day during the height of when we were betting basketball, well, I would have won probably close to zero money because we needed that level of attentiveness to understand what was happening. Like it wasn't proportional. It's not like if you do 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day, you make this much money. And if you do 5 hours a day, you make half as much money. It's not even close to that. If you did 10 hours down to 9 hours, you might make half as much money. If you go down to 5 hours, you might be losing money because you would then lose all of the insight that you have over everything. Like there's a
little bit of that threshold. There's also like an opportunity cost truly in like, you don't know when a random thing's going to occur, right? Like, I remember back, I think I had Embiid get ruled out at a 7:00 lock, like 8 minutes before. So like 6:52. This was a few years ago. This is not a recent one, but like the understanding with DFS, I had to recrunch like 80 DraftKings lineups, 150 FanDuel at the time, get it all in, blah, 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 blah. And it's being ahead of the game is a never ending battle.
Yeah. I think what would have to happen for me to start betting again would be there would have to be a legality change on limits. I don't think anything else.
If you had access to Circa, would that be enough for you?
So I would have to know, can you still beat injury news on Circa? And then like,
we'd have to sweat it and find out. Right?
Could we bet home run props in the way that we did in the past, or are all the lines too sharp? Like that sort of stuff. I would be curious if I had access to a book that doesn't limit players, but I'm guessing because I haven't been on Circa. I've been to Vegas twice in the last 2 years. but I didn't really look through their odds.
Right.
I don't think they have the markets that we want.
I don't think so. No, they're never going to give you big limits on those markets anyways. They're too small.
Like they might give you, so let's say circa on sides and totals is just FanDuel. That's not good enough for me. Like I would need to have limits that are high on random stuff.
Right.
Because it's not just
they
that
can't
there are
take
limits.
that kind of risk.
No, and it's not just that there's limits now. It's like we were taking advantage during a time where sports books didn't understand what they were doing. Like you could have these gaps in time where they would just adjust to things wrong.
Yeah,
and I feel like they're all too sharp now.
As you would describe, so like they would take 15 minutes to update the lines of the main stuff, but then you could go find alt lines. You could find, like you were talking about the futures markets. There are always ways that, I never understood why everything wasn't connected. You pull one team down from the market, it should affect all these other markets.
Well, that's how it is now, right? Now they take the whole game down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to a degree.
And also, I think a lot of these sports books went out of business. That's the other. Because if you were like a Tipico sports book or a Fox Bet or a whatever random place, the only clients that you had were people who were already banned from the main ones.
Right.
So like those sites were screwed. They
had no way of surviving because all the sharps went there.
Right. What novice sports bettor, instead of signing up for the DraftKings or FanDuel that they see all the commercials for, would be like, I'm just going to go bet on Fox Bet. Why would you do that? The only people that are on those sites are the people like me. So yeah, of course so now there's just less access. So yeah. I think it's like it's been really fun to recap it, but like that's what this is to me for now. Like I'll leave. I have an open mind, but I think a lot would have to change for me to like even consider starting all of this again.
There's money to be made from content. I enjoy studying the game. I enjoy thinking about the games. I enjoy talking about how to beat the games. I don't know what else, like that could be enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, you probably, relatively speaking, like this world more than I do, which is weird for me to say because I loved it when I was doing it, but I feel like the scales have tipped for me where I'm not offering as much value from sports betting advice because I can't do as well as I used to. Like the game has gotten sharper, so my relative value there is lower. And I feel like I have just more to offer in other areas, like doing a podcast about psychology and overcoming adversity and like these other things that are important to me. It's like suddenly tipped where it's also like that aligns better with where I am in life than sitting on a computer doing sports betting. And if I was able to win more money at sports betting, the scales would just tip back. I'm weighing and balancing both sides, and it just feels like, I mean, I think it's very clear. It's not even like I'm still considering this. It just has shifted so strongly where I totally am with you. Content it's still my focus. It's just different kind of content now.
Yeah. There was this Jocko Willink quote that I was listening to where he was retelling this story about like somebody that got cancer and survived, and like they were like, would you have taken that away from your experience if you could? And very often they say no. They say, I'm glad I went through it. I'm glad I beat it. I overcame it, yada yada. When I think of like poker, and I've always said this to people, when I think of sports, this is why I'm bringing this up. I don't know that I'd recommend it to anybody, but I'm sure glad I fucking did it. Like the experience I've gained, the education I have, the skills at which it's truly affected my life in more positive ways than negatives. Like, I'm so glad I've done it. And I'm kind of going back through my ticket chase phase where the overlays are insane every basketball season. So I'm starting to build this big pile of DFS tickets that I'm not concerned about cashing in on. I would be nice, but it's more of just a kind of it'd be nice if it works out. But I do enjoy it. Like, it's a part of it is competing against other sharps. It is a little bit fun, but it is a competition still that I like the winning so much.
The high of like getting on the show every day and like talking about, oh, the Jazz won another game. and it's not like some dirty high. Like really, it was like that was
Yeah.
we're winning and we're in it and it's so much fun. Like yeah, I would never say that I wish I didn't do it. It was the best thing ever. It really was. Like that was the most fun. That
Yeah.
Celtics run might have been the most fun I've ever had doing anything.
Yep. I agree. And actually, what's super funny is like that Jazz run was fascinating.
Yeah.
I was very slightly invested in that, but you were so early. Like we talked about it every day for months, and like I don't even know how well it played out, but there was a point where you were just printing everything. I don't know how much you had to
Yeah,
cash in on.
it wasn't that much money because they didn't make the play-in or the playoffs, but I still did really well betting their season win total overs. And I
Mhm.
have the video. I'm pretty sure we have a clip that I posted of the Jazz cashing their like the win total that was minus 110 both sides, like their actual number,
Yeah.
23 and a half wins. I'm pretty sure that it hit in January.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it was not even the All-Star break, and
Yep.
they were like 24 and 20 or something.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe it
And
was
they definitely had a poor second half, but still, like,
yeah, because they ended up winning like 36 games because they traded all their players. So that was
good
upsetting.
times, good
Yeah,
times.
like if they had won three more games, then that would have been thousands of dollars. I think they missed the plan by 2 games. Yeah, watching Jazz Kings games in the middle of the night by myself was like exhilarating, really. I think what was the game? Fontecchio when he got the game-winning dunk against the Warriors. Do you remember that? The Warriors. So the Warriors were
Not
beating.
really ringing a bell though.
Okay, so the Jazz were playing the Warriors. The Warriors sat all their starters, and we obviously bet on the Jazz, or I bet on the Jazz. I don't. Who knows? Like who was able to follow it. So bet on Utah. Plus, like for the season bet, we were obviously
Yeah.
Utah, and the Warriors were inbounding the ball up one with 7 seconds left, and it was just Jordan Poole they were trying to get it to because Curry's not there. And Malik Beasley kind of like I think it was Kelly Olynyk kind of like body checked Poole, and they didn't call the foul, and so Olynyk was in there, and then Beasley got the ball and passed it to this guy Simone Fontecchio, who was like the worst player in the whole NBA, and he dunked it with like half a second left to win the game. And like the Jazz announcers
He's
are
got rotation minutes for the Pistons
oh,
now.
oh
Don't speak on Fontecchio's name.
okay. At the time, he was the worst
He
rated
was
player on the
fringe.
Jazz in 538. Yeah, and one of the worst guys in the league. That's crazy. Like, I don't know what players are on any teams anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I did not know. Like, I knew the 12-man rotation plus G League guys for every team for years, and I didn't know DeMar DeRozan was on the Kings until this week. It just
That was always a weird one for me.
If nothing else, people can change. That's me. Like you can get different interests because
solid evidence.
I would have never thought that I would be a person who wouldn't know the NBA rotations. Like that was my whole life since I was 13.
Well, you moved on. You found bigger and better things.
Yeah, I think so. But we'll see. Maybe we'll resume someday. Maybe we'll. I mean, we can always do podcasts.
You don't have much FOMO. I do like podcasting and all that jazz. So, hey, I love talking any basketball with you. However, you can do we can do recap shows and just say what happened. I don't care, man. I just love talking ball.
Yeah, it's always fun. Well, I still like playing ball, so I haven't changed that much.
I see some of those clips every now and then. You post those.
Yeah, I've gotten a little post happy on Instagram, but it's been fun.
Good for you.